Hi, everyone. So I think we will get started with today's event now. So thank you all so much for joining and welcome to the second part of our 7-part construction webinar series that covers some of the top challenges construction and building material companies face and solutions that NetSuite as well as Appficiency's construction solution provide to solve those key issues. So today we'll be covering the topic of construction estimating and schedule of values. We'll focus on how clients can create tasks and a project plan with Appficiency's schedule of values. So to start, my name is Klara Szabo, and I'll be kicking off the event for today. I am a marketing specialist at Appficiency in charge of running webinars and various strategic marketing initiatives. I have with me today Johnny Then, our principal and CEO at Appficiency, as well as Morteza Hosseini, our director of delivery and a seasoned construction expert, and as well Joyce Liu, who is a senior product engineer here at Appficiency. So for those of you that are not familiar, NetSuite is the first cloud ERP founded over 20 years ago. NetSuite has more than 29,000 customers in more than 200 countries across the globe. And also introducing Appficiency, who provides NetSuite consulting, implementation, and integration services. Appficiency has several construction solutions and has worked with clients in the land developer, general contractor, subcontractor, and engineering design service space. We also recently received the NetSuite Construction Alliance Partner Spotlight Award for its work in the construction industry. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's event will be recorded. All lines will be muted. As well, we will have time for questions at the end, so please submit them throughout the chat. And to get started, I'll first be going over the agenda for today. So we'll be starting with some introductions, then an interview and overview for the schedule of values. Then we'll have a 30-minute product demo, and then we'll end off with some Q&A as well as next steps. So I'll now be handing it over to Johnny Then, our principal and CEO at Appficiency, for introductions and a presentation.
Thanks very much, Clara. Appreciate it, and welcome everyone to episode 2 here of our webinar series on the construction capabilities between NetSuite and the Appficiency solution. My name is Johnny Then. I am principal and CEO for Appficiency. I have been an ex-NetSuite solution consultant and architect. I have developed solutions across the manufacturing and advertising media publishing verticals, as well as e-commerce and now construction. I'm excited to join you guys in a broad sense across all my consulting background. NetSuite's one of the great platforms out there of our day and age, and to bring the construction capabilities to it full bore is a personal passion, of course, but also a very exciting development for the industry as a whole. I'll let Morteza introduce himself now.
Thanks, Clara. Thanks, Jenny. Morteza Hosseini here. I'm the director of delivery at Appficiency. In terms of background, I'm a civil engineer who did his master in construction and project management. So you guys can tell I'm very passionate about construction. So I worked for 14 years in construction industry in different roles, wearing different hats. And then it was 8 years ago that I decided to move to the IT side of the business and help over 350 construction companies implementing ERP solution. Glad to be here and excited to share what we are capable of doing with you all.
Thanks so much, Morteza. So as host here, guys, what I'd like to do is give you guys a sense of the types of things that we want to talk about here today. And I'm going to interview Morteza here for the benefit of the audience. So, we wanted to talk about the core types of companies that use Estimate and SOV. And if you have listened to sort of our first episode, you would have known that we covered off the 4 major categories, which are land developers, the GCs, and that are hiring subs, as well as self-performers, and then the design and engineering firms. What I wanted to get into in this estimating session here today is really to ask Morteza, we hear about budgeting all the time, and in a normal industry or in an industry not construction, where, if it's manufacturing or distribution, or if it's software or just general services, professional services, when we provide an estimate, the estimate is actually an estimate of charges to be billed to the customer. It may be broken down by some level of category, but what's different, Morteza, about estimating and cost-based estimating for construction companies?
Perfect. So I would say everything starts with thinking about what would be the cost in a project. Any type of construction projects. So that's where we usually begin. Now, if you think about a land development company, they want to know what is the cost of developing a land. And of course, they would have different structure in terms of tracking the cost to the phase, to the lot. And when you compare it to let's say the general contractors, it's all about, okay, I need to submit a quote to my customer, but first I need to know what is the cost of this project to me, so I can add my markup, my margin, and then tell the customer, hey, if you want a fixed speed, for example, right, this is my price. And it's very, very similar concept would apply, let's say, to the self-performers. The only difference I would say here between a GC and self-performers is self-performers, they use their own resources. So they need to first know what is the cost of those resources to the business. And for the general contractors who are hiring subcontractors, in terms of, instead of internal resources, they just want to know, hey, all my potential subcontractors, tell me what is my cost of doing this job according to the scope. And then the last piece of the puzzle, which we're talking about, the design and engineering firms, right? It's they are using this capability, but in a different, I would say, capacity. They don't have a really detailed estimate because all they are dealing with is the design and the documents, which, as a rule of thumb, I can tell you, you are looking at a 1:10 ratio of design compared to the build that all the other type of companies are dealing with, right? So you can imagine that the volume is not huge.
Got it. Great. Thank you. I think that helps us understand what cost-based estimating is a bit more. Now, what would be your suggestions, do you think, in terms of, should we be creating that estimate in NetSuite, or should we be importing it using another system? What's normal, and what should we expect for a NetSuite customer?
So, Johnny, it really depends on the type of the company and how sophisticated are the projects that we are dealing with. So usually there are three different types of weight in order to generate an estimate. One is you are using an estimating tool. Lots of them are available in the market. Some companies, they use their Excel template. They have a master list in Excel, and this is the word of project management for many of the construction companies. And then the last type or last way of doing it is you would create everything in your ERP system, which is now the question is, which one is the most suitable one? So if you think about the different types of the construction companies, I start with land developers. So usually they have a pro forma. Okay, so that's the term that they use in order to manage their budget, understand how much money they need for each of the project activities. Either they use Excel internally, or they hire another consultant to provide the detailed estimate. For them, most of the time we are looking for minimum of 500 lines of estimate, and this is already in Excel. So if you have something in Excel, I would definitely say importing would be the best option. rather than going to your ERP solution and enter those things manually, or even having a template and copy from that template. When you are looking for general contractors or self-performers, most of the times they are using an estimating software, because they need to calculate the quantity, they need to use drawings and lots of details needed in order to generate your estimate for a project. So in this case, also, I would recommend import. Why? Because 99% of those estimating software, they can export your estimate into Excel. And guess what? We can easily import and read the data into NetSuite. Then,
that's great.
If I go to the last category, if you recall from the budgeting section, we were talking about design and engineering firms that they don't really have that much detail in their estimate. So you're talking about having 5 to 10 items. So in this case, you might not want to go back and forth between import. You can easily generate different templates and copy your estimate from one job to another, or having, create template projects in NetSuite, and easily by having a new project say, hey, copy my estimate from this template. I can just adjust the quantity, for example. So in this case, I will create it in NetSuite.
Got it. It sounds like there's flexibility, and that's great. Hopefully, it doesn't impact any of the project capabilities or metrics or any of the job costing. Let me ask you though, when it comes to construction, the construction industry, this was a new term for me when we started delving into it. Work codes versus cost types. How do these interact with the estimate, and what do they mean to the estimate?
So they are the main tools in order to run your reports, in order to use your estimate for job costing. Because as soon as you have a project that you need to run, now the first question is, how much budget do I have? How much budget do I have left? And each of those categories, you just did an estimate. Now you need to track what you estimated against your commitment, against your actual cost, against your revenue. And this is the fun part. So when you're talking about the work codes, usually most of the people in construction are using the CSI codes. So these are the actual activities that you are doing on the projects. And then when we're talking about the cost types, there are some differences between these different types of industry. Land developers usually are using hard costs and soft costs. General contractors or self-performers, they use labor, material, subcontract, equipment. And then when we're talking about design and engineering firm, most of the time they just use labor and equipment. That's the difference. And those cost types most of the time are tied back and linked to your GL accounts. And now you can imagine all your contracts, all your billings, all your revenue. This is technically the foundation of managing the projects.
Got it. Very cool. Then, if you got so much detail in the estimate already with work codes and cost types, you got the budgets and estimates in there already, what do you need schedule of values for?
A schedule of value, I go back to the initial question that you asked me. Budgeting is cost-based, right? But at the end of the day, the language with the customer is revenue. The language with a bank is money, is your receivable. So a schedule of value is technically a tool that will provide you that common language. Now, if you think about a land developer, every month they need to send their draw to the bank. So you need to provide a schedule of value to the bank in order to say, hey, each of these CSI codes, or you might group them together, this is how much I would expect to spend. And then each month, you send your draw and you tell the bank that this is my progress, so this is the money that I need. Same concept would apply to the general contractors and self-performers. So this is the way to track the progress against your billing, against your revenue side. And for the design and engineering firm, they don't really use their schedule value, to be honest. Or if they use, we are talking about 2 or 3 lines compared to a typical draw that you might find 40, 50 lines in your schedule value.
Great. Thank you very much. That was very helpful to understand how estimates matter to various types of the construction subtypes that we defined in our episode 1 series. Can you talk to me now about what does that schedule values to the billing process look like? How does that work for a construction company? And I think this will help the foundation for what the folks are going to see in the demo as well.
Absolutely. So a schedule value usually used for 2 main types of construction contracts. Either you are talking about a fixed price contract or fixed bid, or you're talking about a cost plus contract. So the first step, of course, is for us to have an estimate to become a budget for the job and project. So we discussed that those costs are categorized by codes, which it could be either CSI code or your internal code, and of course the time. So when we were talking about, let's say, labor, material, subcontract, equipment, another cost type that you can imagine is a revenue. Now this cost type would drive all the revenue to your projects. So now you can use the CSI code or group of the CSI code or CSI divisions as per industry standard for billing purposes and for sending your billing breakdown to the customer. Now, majority of the time you will see that in the demo that Joyce had also. You have your cost, you would apply your markup, you define your schedule value. So now you can track if you're over or under against each of those expected project tasks, which are really, concrete work, masonry work, etc. And then sometimes codes and their resulting schedule value can be numerous. So in my example with the land developer, I said we might have 500 lines in the estimate. So you can't really report on 500 lines every month. So you might want to group them. And this is what, of course, you need to understand in terms of the difference between your estimate and your schedule value. And then your schedule value and billing are tightly tied together and have periodic sensitivity, like time sensitivity. So every time that you bill a customer, you rely on your schedule value and you report your progress against the schedule value that most of the time you have to provide to the customer at the beginning of the project and be agreed upon. And last but not least, project managers also use these codes and schedules daily to manage the cost and revenue. So that's another benefit of now kind of you integrated your cost and revenue and everything had the same, I would say, flow, which is very important for the construction companies, because you can, at any point of time, you can compare, okay, this is how much I made on this specific item. This is how much was my cost. Many of the big decisions are made based on this analysis. Maybe you are not good in managing the cost on concrete. Maybe it's better to hire a subcontractor instead of using your own resources. And that's the importance of SOV and how I will tie it back to the estimate.
That's excellent. Thanks, Morteza. It's pretty sophisticated, actually, and quite best practice. Actually, it would be interesting to see other industries also pick up some of the key benefits that construction companies have learned over the years. I'm very excited, folks, to take us now into the product demonstration. You're going to have a great treat here, taking a tour through the details of product estimating. We'll be having that hosted by Joyce Liu. She's one of our senior product engineers, just an absolute brainiac from the University of Waterloo, which is the MIT of Canada. She's got broad experience both in startup to midlife product range development companies, with over 4 years in product development, marketing, architecture, dev, and engineering. So it should be an absolute treat. She's 4 times NetSuite certified, and so can provide you with all the details you need. Anytime people have questions, or if they're our primary customers also use our alias for software support at Appficiency.com, should you need to get in touch with the engineering team. With that, I'm looking forward to seeing the demonstration Joyce is prepared for you all, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Morteza and Johnny, for starting us off. So now I'm going to start the demo. As you can see in front of me, I have an estimate. This estimate is for a sports stadium project. As you can see here, the work for the project has already been broken down into work type. And each of the work type is mapped to the CSI code, which is an industry standard code. For each of the work type, you can see that there are different cost types associated with it: labor, material, equipment, and subcontractor. And then for each type, there are different estimated costs. Each of the estimated costs is estimated based on the cost type. For example, with labor, we have internal resource, and that gives us a unit cost that drives the estimated cost. For material and equipment, we have long-term suppliers and partners. We worked them in the past, and we know how much it's going to cost, and that gives us the estimated cost for those 2 types. For work, we're going to subcontract out. We have issued vendor RFQs, and the vendor has given us like a price on how much it's going to cost, and that gives us the estimated cost for the subcontractor cost type. As you can see on the screen, for each of the work type, there is an estimated cost and there is a markup. So on this estimate, we are charging a 15% markup. And that markup gives us like a markup amount, which gives us the billing rate and the revenue that we're going to, the revenue / the price we're going to quote the customer. What's interesting about this estimate is that it allows you to see both cost and revenue side by side. And you can see them for each of the work type. And you can also see that each of the costs, markup and revenue, is also tied to a cost type. Later on, when we get them into NetSuite and the NetSuite, the ERP system, you'll be able to have more business intelligence and job costing and aggregate based on the work type and cost type. So now that my estimate is ready, I'm going to import this into NetSuite. I have already defined the customer, the project for this estimate. So all I need to do is upload it into NetSuite. And I have already gone ahead and uploaded this into NetSuite. What's interesting about NetSuite is that you only need to enter in the information once. For example, I enter in the information on this estimate, and now all I need to do is use CSV import to upload this into NetSuite. If you're using like an actual estimating software, then you can just export from there and like upload the Excel file to NetSuite as well. On this estimate that's generated, you can see that there's like a wrapper project, which is the same project as specified on my estimate. So everything that's on the estimate is in NetSuite, and you can see that this is generated using a CSV upload. Because everything on the estimate is already in NetSuite, it's really handy. Like your people don't need to enter in this information, and it saves a lot of time. So as you can see on this estimate, for each of the lines, there's like a work code or work type. And then there's like a cost type, which is what we saw on the Excel file. And then the cost amount, markup, and revenue. Another cool thing about NetSuite is that like once you enter in the information, as long as the numbers are there, you can generate many job costing, project accounting reports on it. For example, like we have the cost amount, we have the revenue amount, and it's tied to a work code, work type, and a cost type. I'm just going to show you some of the sample report that you can get out of this one estimate. So one report is basically like a work type comparison of cost, markup, and revenue. And it also tells me like what percentage of revenue is generated by different work type. For example, roof accessory accounts for most of my revenue. It's also being highlighted so that like if you have like any report you want, you can highlight them, change their layout so that it's easier for you to see. Another set of reports is showing the cost, markup, and revenue by cost type. For example, like on the estimate, we see that like each of the lines has a specific cost type, and that cost type is also tied to a cost amount, markup, and revenue. So that's how NetSuite can generate that report. It basically aggregates and group your cost, markup, and revenue by these cost type. And again, you can see like what percentage of your revenue is generated by a certain cost type. In this case, material accounts for most of your revenue. Another thing I would like to mention is that how these cost type are generated. So with Appficiency solution, for each of your work code, you already have a default cost type associated with it. However, you can overwrite the default. This gives you flexibility on a project by project basis. For example, if we go to like another report, so basically this report is showing that like for final site survey, the default cost type is subcontractor. However, because on this project, we realized we actually have internal resource to do the site survey, and we don't need to subcontract it out. So I can literally overwrite the default cost type by like adding a specific item. The item also has like a cost type associated with it. Because I'm adding a labor item, I'm saying that this will be a labor cost type, and I'm able to overwrite the default subcontractor cost type with labor, and have labor and have like the cost, markup, and revenue reflect on labor. This is really handy because you have a default cost type that's automatically going to populate if you choose this work code, but you can also override it manually based on how it's going on a project by project basis. And this is the flexibility NetSuite and Appficiency solution would give you. The other flexibility I would like to mention is that with like Appficiency's work code / work type, you can also like overwrite and adjust the description. So if I go to edit, you can see that I'm allowed to edit and change the work code description. And this is because like with Appficiency's construction solution, like you have a default work code description that you choose to put in. However, with that default description, you can also overwrite the description on a project by project basis, or on like a transaction by transaction basis. And again, this gives you a flexibility. It will populate the work code description based on how you specified in the work code, but you can also change it whenever you want based on what's going on the project. And this is like a flexibility that many construction software do not offer. They lock you in with like one work code and one kind of work code description. But like Appficiency solution and NetSuite like gives you that freedom, and you're not stuck with one particular description. You can change it and override it however you want. So on this estimate, we already seeing several business intelligence / costing report that can generate from this one estimate. Another thing I would like to mention is that on this estimate, there's cost, markup, and revenue. And the cost can actually become your cost budget. For example, like on this estimate, you estimated $15K, it will be the cost for final site survey. Later on in the project, you can use this cost budget for your project accounting and project reporting. So essentially, this estimate tracks the cost budget, and whenever you have a PO or vendor invoice, you can tag the same work code and cost type on your PO and vendor bill, and that value will automatically feed into your committed cost and actual cost, and it will be compared against this cost budget that you specified on the estimate. This will be the topic of another webinar series where like we're gonna see how you can utilize the cost budget against actual, against committed, against outstanding. And in addition to cost budget, the revenue could be used as a revenue budget. For example, the revenue amount you specify on the estimate becomes your revenue budget on the project, and the actual revenue and payment you receive the customer can also be tagged against a work code and cost type, and you can compare your revenue budget against actual revenue. So just to show you how it works in action, I'm just going to go to the dashboard and show you like sample report that shows you your cost budget and revenue budget. So these two sample report are also created based on the data on this one estimate. Again, I just want to emphasize how in NetSuite, one simple estimate can give you a wealth of information that will allow you to run your business more profitably, and focus on the things that truly matter. For example, again, the cost budget is driven by the cost amount, and the revenue budget is driven by the revenue amount, so that we know where each of the number comes from. So here I am actually on the dashboard of the NetSuite. The dashboard is when you first log into NetSuite, and this is the view you're going to immediately see. And it's really handy to have this report on the dashboard, because when you first log into NetSuite, you can immediately see your cost job cost accounting and revenue. So on this report, you can see that the cost, there are different type of cost, and there's different type of revenue, and the cost and revenue are broken down based on the work code / work type. For example, you have a cost budget, and that cost budget is driven by the estimate cost amount. You have a committed cost, an actual cost, and outstanding commitment. Because right now we're just at the estimating stage. These costs are zero, but later on, as we progress on the project, you'll see these values being populated by your real transactions. So during an actual project, whenever you make a PO or you pay your vendor, committed costs, actual costs, and outstanding commitment will have values, and you'll be able to compare them against the actual cost budget. The other side is revenue. The revenue is also generated from the revenue on the estimate, and it gives you the revenue budget and the actual revenue. This report can be filtered on a project by project basis, but you can also have this report visualize all of the project. And you can also filter it by subsidiary. So the different type of costs and different type of revenue can be shown on a work type / work code basis, but you can also see it on a cost type basis. For example, like the cost is being aggregated by cost type. So here I can see the different cost budget and the actual committed cost, actual cost, and outstanding on a cost type basis. And this is really the true power of Appficiency's construction solution. You can see the same data. You can see the same data on different side. You can see it from a work type side. You can also see it from a cost type side, and that will like really help you run your business because you are able to see information and data that's hard to see anywhere else. In future webinars, we're going to actually see like how the values are going to pop up in each of the committed costs and actual costs. But right now it's actually showing like a realistic view, and that's because we didn't issue any POs and vendor bills. Again, this estimate gives you a wealth of data that you can use for your job costing and job accounting. Because NetSuite is one integrated system, the numbers, the cost amount, revenue amount, and markup that you have on your estimate get directly applied to your project side because everything is tied together. We're able to take this value from the estimate and use it use it on the project management side and project accounting side. So the other thing I would like to talk about is that the revenue also feed into the schedule values. So the schedule values is being defined on a work code or work type level. So the revenue you have for the schedule for each unique schedule values. And so the revenue you have for each unique work code is going to become the schedule values. For example, for permanent tier forming, the schedule value is actually the sum of these two lines, because these two are the net. These two are the net revenue / scheduled value on this project. Like in future webinars, we're going to talk about the ABC product and how these two values actually become the scheduled values and how you can bill the customer based on your progress complete on the schedule values. With Appficiency solution, we take the revenue and the work code, and for each unique work code, we sum up the revenue, and that becomes the scheduled values. Another cool thing about Appficiency construction solution is that you can have like 2 PDFs, which tells you what are the different estimates that you have in the system. For example, I have this estimate, and this estimate basically shows me on each of the work code / work type how much is the schedule values for each. And it also shows me estimate 16, the schedule values. And it tells me how the schedule what's being changed and added to the schedule values. And it also shows the different estimate that's for the same project. The other PDF is like a division code PDF. So each of the work code has a division to it. For example, this is division 1, and it also tells me how did my schedule value change on a division by division basis, and how much has been changed by each estimate. That way, later on, I can have an aggregate view of what are the changes to my schedule values, what's being changed, and what's happening for each of the estimate. So we have seen how Appficiency solution and NetSuite allows you to compare cost, markup, and revenue on a work code / work type basis. We have also seen how it allows you to compare cost, markup, and revenue by a cost type basis. And you can generate reporting that's on your dashboard, and it allows you to track, it allows you to use these values for your project accounting and use them as budgets. The other thing I would like to emphasize, because the work code, work type, and cost type is the basis of all the project accounting and data, is that each of the work code and cost type are completely flexible. You can create any work code that fits your business. You are not limited to just the CSI code. Right now, I'm just using CSI code because it is the industry standard. But you can create any code you want. You can change the description to anything you want. And the other thing, the same applies to cost type. Right now, I'm just using the for type. However, if you want to see cost type with a more granular view, then you can create more cost type and tie those cost type to your work code and tie it to your transaction. You're not limited to just these four big types. You can have as many cost type as you want, and that will feed a more granular view to your revenue and cost comparison. And that will also feed a more granular view on your project accounting comparison against your cost, against your budget versus actual for cost and revenue. So now I'm going to go into how the estimate is tied to a project and how you can flexibly create tasks and project plan based on your bid. Now, at this stage of the project, the bid is accepted and the project contract is awarded. So I'm just going to create task on the project. I'm going to open up this project, and you can see that this project is actually blank. So I'm just going to open it up right now. The project task is completely blank. However, after creating task and assignment and sync it to project, then the project plan will be fully fleshed out, and you can see a project plan was milestones and work that's based on your estimate. So right now I'm just going to sync it to project. So let's take note of the first line, final site survey. It has a quantity of 100. And once this estimate has been synced to the project, we can see that there's 100 hours that's being allocated for final site survey. Okay, so I'm going to refresh the project. As you can see, there are milestones and tasks being created. And for final site survey, the planned work is 100 hours, which is exactly what's being specified on the estimate. The permanent tier forming is for 1,000 hours. The permanent tier forming is for 1,000 hours and 700 hours, which together, permanent tier forming will have a planned work of 1,000 and 700 hours. And you can see a breakdown of the work. 1,000 is for material, and then 700 is for labor. And you can see that the work code / work type actually becomes a milestone task. And then it's a different type of work that's being specified on the estimate. For example, material and labor are being rolled up to the work type, and the hours / amount of work is being rolled up together. So this is how we are setting up a project once our bid is accepted, and our project team can get started with planning for the project. And this also shows you how for any work you specify on the estimate, you can flexibly create any task with any hours And if we actually look at like any of the tasks, for example, construction labor for final site survey, you can see that a site surveyor is being assigned as default. And this is because for like work code final site survey, we have specified a site surveyor as a generic resource. That way you can plan your project based on the generic resource. And, and the generic resource specified on your work code / work type is being assigned with its own billing class and actual cost. So this completes our demo. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. If you have any question, please ask and we'll be happy to answer. Over to you, Morteza and Johnny.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that demo, Joyce. We will now be moving on to the Q&A portion of our webinar. All right, so we have already received some questions in the chat, but as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to send them throughout and we will be sure to get to them within these next couple of minutes. So to start with our first question that we got in the chat, someone is wondering, do you have pre-built integrations with any of the estimating software in the market? So I'll let either Johnny or Morteza answer this question.
Perfect. Great question. Of course, that would be one of the first question that everyone should ask as soon as we're talking about importing the estimate. There are lots of great estimating software in the market, and many of the construction companies would pick which one would work best for them. One of the benefits that we are having with NetSuite is we can design our import template to match all the export that you can imagine that you can get from any of those estimating software. So really, the need it is actually in question, I believe. And now what we want to do, instead of picking one specific software that might be applicable to maybe 5 to 10% of the people, we decided to go with this road, and now you're getting the benefit of the flexibility of the import that we can have, that can support any of the software in the industry.
Amazing. Thanks, Morteza. Johnny, anything to add to that?
No, I think Morteza covered it well.
Awesome. So we also got another question in the chat. So someone mentioned that they use Excel to estimate their projects. So they're wondering if they need to change their template to ours, as in Appficiency's construction solution.
I see. I think I already answered that question by talking about, the first question. So no, absolutely, there is no need, and that's the beauty of NetSuite and the import that you can have with NetSuite. We can take whatever you have and push it into NetSuite.
Awesome. Thanks, Morteza. So we got another one as well. Someone's wondering, can the work codes be linked to our inventory items in NetSuite or your product?
I can take that one, Morteza, if you'd like.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So the work codes absolutely can be linked to inventory items, and naturally on the estimate they are. The work codes represent both they represent a wrapper around multiple items in NetSuite, so you can actually have multiple items share a common work code. And of course, on each estimate record, like all transactions of NetSuite, you can then specify a specific association at that time, which is different than the standard representation you might have made, either on the item record in NetSuite or on the work code record in the Appficiency work code record in the system where you associate the item to as well. So both ways can work, and it allows the work code and the items to interact flexibly, which ultimately means that your P&L can be shaped and your balance sheets can be shaped via that relationship as well.
Actually, I'm happy that someone asked that question, because this is one of the challenges that many of the other ERP solutions have. The reason for that is they can either support the CSI code, and if you use the CSI code, that would be your code. And this is very important, specifically for the self-performers, because they use the material. Most of the time, those materials are in the inventory. So they want to just link their inventory items to their estimate. So, great question.
Awesome. Thank you both. So we got another question in the chat. Someone's wondering, does the estimate have a history? So can they see previous versions to compare to the actual current version? So estimate versus actual.
Not only, so usually what we call it, we say original estimate. What was your original estimate, and now what is your current estimate? And the difference between the two is most of the time the change orders that you get from the customers, or it could be even internal change orders or adjustment to the budget. So if you're asking that question because you are a land developer, I know a typical land developer, from the day that they start their first draft of estimate until the day that they actually start the project, they might go into 10 different versions of their estimate. And NetSuite can definitely track all those versions and even compare version 1 to 2, etc., etc. So absolutely, you can do that.
Great, thank you, Morteza. Go ahead, Johnny.
If I could just add one thing, Klara, no problem. I wanted to add that in the demonstration today, you saw the backbone multi-estimate PDF, which would allow you to take multiple approved estimates and present them in a PDF format. But the same can be true for estimate version in history. And the way that particular function works, it allows you to cherry pick certain estimates that are at fully approved or owner approved level, and then you can move forward with that at a glance view of the estimate changes over time. Because we are using in the backend solution, because we're using separate records, there's much more detail than just pulling from NetSuite's actual audit history. You're pulling from also multiple records and multiple scenarios that you want to support in a single project view.
Great, thank you, Johnny. So last question that we got through in the chat. Someone's wondering, do you have any integration or sync between the MS project and the estimate?
So this is a very typical question for the construction folk. One thing that we need to clarify here is what is the need for that. So of course, if your ERP solution cannot provide you, the start and end date and critical path and all the information that you need for scheduling or resource allocation, you might definitely need to have an integration with MS Project, and of course a link between MS Project and Estimate for the purpose of cash flow would be very appealing. But the good news here is you can get all of this in NetSuite. And in fact, in your estimate template, we can go as far as adding the start and end date of your project tasks, if you will, to match them with your estimate. So I believe ERP is not only about integration between the modules, accounting and project management, for example. It's about integrating the entire ecosystem. So you can definitely get the benefit of think about it in a way that you have your CSI code that would provide you your cost breakdown structure. Now you want to get your work breakdown structure and turn it to a schedule. You can definitely do it with NetSuite.
Great. Thank you again, Morteza and Johnny. So on that note, I think that we will end it here if we have no further questions. So I'd like to wrap up by going over what is next in our construction webinar series. So essentially we have 5 more upcoming webinars, which will cover retainage, progress billing, change orders, job costing, and a customer success story. So our next one will be on May 24th from 1 to 2 p.m. and that will cover the topic of retainage. So definitely be on the lookout for that invite. With that, thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll be sure to follow up with you with the recorded version of this webinar. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you at webinar number 3.